History Secrets.
A troubling question arises when we observe the conflicts of the modern world. Why do so many wars seem to emerge in places that, at first glance, have no direct connection to one another? For decades, political leaders have spoken about security, terrorism, and national defense. But some analysts propose a different reading of these events. A reading that attempts to connect military decisions, technological transformations, and global geopolitical shifts. This interpretation begins with an event that deeply marked the 21st century: the attacks of September 11th. After that day, the United States initiated what became known as the War on Terror. Military interventions emerged in several countries, including Afghanistan, Iraq, and later Libya. The official narrative stated that these actions aimed to eliminate terrorist networks. However, some observers raised an uncomfortable question. Why were certain countries attacked even without proven direct links to those responsible for the attacks? A controversial interpretation suggests that these conflicts may be linked to a strategic reorganization of the Middle East. According to this view, certain powers would seek to create a new regional order, an order in which Israel would assume a dominant position. This hypothesis is often referred to by some analysts as Pax Judaica, an expression that describes the idea of a regional system of stability imposed by a central power. It is important to note that this interpretation does not represent academic consensus, but it frequently appears in alternative geopolitical debates. Within this interpretive logic, several Middle Eastern conflicts would gain a new explanation. Countries considered strategic obstacles would need to be weakened, and among these countries, Iran often appears. Some analysts suggest that a potential war involving Iran could profoundly alter the regional balance. A war of this kind would have devastating consequences for all sides, but it could also provoke a withdrawal of external powers from the region. This withdrawal would create a power vacuum, and power vacuums rarely remain empty for long. New forces always emerge ready to occupy them. In this hypothetical scenario, Israel could emerge as a strategic center of the Middle East, not only militarily, but also economically. While these geopolitical tensions unfold, another phenomenon silently transforms the world: the accelerated advancement of artificial intelligence. Gigantic data centers are being built in various countries. Governments and companies invest billions in advanced computational technology. But an important question arises: how exactly will this technology be used in the future? Some analysts argue that the true potential of artificial intelligence lies not only in productivity, but in surveillance. The idea would be to create systems capable of monitoring virtually all human activities, digital identities, digital currencies, complete records of economic and social behavior. In this type of system, every purchase, every movement, and every interaction could be recorded. Algorithms would analyze this data to build behavioral profiles. These profiles would allow the prediction of future actions, and possibly influence individual decisions. This is what many call the digital surveillance state. Countries like China are already experimenting with partial versions of this model. Social scoring systems and digital monitoring are emerging in different contexts. For some observers, this trend may expand globally in the coming decades, especially if political crises and conflicts increase, because periods of instability often justify stricter control measures. But global geopolitics is not limited to the Middle East or technology. Europe faces growing internal tensions. Intense migration flows generate deep political debates. At the same time, the war in Ukraine has reignited military rivalries among major powers. Some analysts believe that the European continent may face years of significant instability. External conflicts and internal pressures may occur simultaneously. In the United States, another type of tension is intensifying. Political polarization has reached levels rarely seen in recent history. Deep ideological divisions fragment society. Some observers fear that these tensions may generate increasing episodes of political violence. In Asia, historical rivalries continue to shape the regional balance. China, Japan, and India maintain complex strategic disputes. At the same time, trade disputes between major powers may evolve into economic blockades. For example, a naval embargo against China could drastically affect its economy. This is because much of its energy and food resources come from abroad. When we look at this global scenario, an unsettling image emerges. Multiple points of tension seem to arise simultaneously. Regional wars, trade conflicts, political polarization, migration crises, technological advances capable of monitoring entire societies. Some analysts interpret this set of phenomena as signs of a profound transformation in the world order, a transformation that could lead to the emergence of new centers of power, and possibly new forms of global governance. But there is also another possibility. Perhaps many of these events are not connected by a single plan. Perhaps they are simply the complex result of intertwined political, economic, and historical interests. History tends to show that the future rarely follows a simple script. Grand theories may seem convincing, especially when seemingly disconnected events begin to form patterns. But the true test of these interpretations will always be time, because only the future can confirm whether these hypotheses reflect real trends, or whether they are merely human attempts to make sense of the chaos of history. Even so, observing these possibilities forces us to reflect on power, on technology, and on the direction our civilization may take in the coming decades. Some of these interpretations suggest profound transformations in the global system. If these readings are partially correct, the 21st century could completely redefine the international order. But only the coming years will reveal how far these trends will truly go. When we analyze long-term geopolitical scenarios, an inevitable question arises. What would happen if multiple global crises began to occur simultaneously? Some analysts suggest that the world may enter a prolonged period of instability, not necessarily because of a single conflict, but due to the convergence of several factors: regional wars, economic crises, technological changes, and profound social transformations. Within this interpretation, Europe appears as one of the most vulnerable regions. The continent faces two different types of pressure at the same time. On one side, external tensions involving Russia. On the other, internal tensions related to immigration and political polarization. Some observers believe these two forces may combine in an explosive way. External conflicts consume military and economic resources, while internal conflicts weaken social cohesion. When these two phenomena occur simultaneously, governments may face increasing difficulties in maintaining stability. This possibility concerns several international security analysts. In the United States, another type of social transformation seems to gain strength. The political division between different ideological groups has become extremely intense. Incompatible narratives compete for space in the public sphere. Institutions are constantly questioned, and trust between different sectors of society seems to decline. Some researchers compared this situation to a curious psychological experiment. Imagine a container filled with red ants and black ants. As long as the environment remains stable, they coexist without major conflicts. But if someone violently shakes the container, the behavior changes immediately. The ants begin attacking one another. In this example, aggression does not arise spontaneously. It arises when the environment is disturbed. Some analysts use this metaphor to describe polarized societies. When accumulated tensions meet triggering events, conflicts can emerge quickly. While these internal divisions deepen, other regions of the world also face strategic pressures. Latin America, for example, remains at the center of economic and energy disputes. Some interpretations suggest that countries rich in natural resources may become points of international tension. Among these countries, Venezuela often appears. Conflicts involving energy resources are rarely simple. They usually involve commercial interests, political alliances, and military strategies. Therefore, even regional disputes can generate global consequences, especially when major powers become directly or indirectly involved. At the same time, Asia is experiencing a process of accelerated geopolitical transformation. China, Japan, and India are expanding their economic and military capabilities. These countries compete for regional influence and access to strategic trade routes. The balance among these powers will be one of the decisive factors for the future of the world order. Among all these tensions, there is also the economic dimension. A possible trade blockade against China, for example, would have massive consequences. China's economy depends heavily on oil imports, and it also depends on large volumes of food coming from abroad. If maritime routes are disrupted, the impact could be profound. But this scenario would not affect only China. The global economy is deeply interconnected. Disruptions in one major economy reverberate across the entire planet, and financial markets, supply chains, and industrial systems would be affected. In this context of simultaneous conflicts, a controversial hypothesis emerges again. Some analysts suggest that global chaos could benefit certain centers of power, because periods of instability often generate extraordinary economic opportunities. Technology companies, financial institutions, and military industries often prosper in times of crisis. Within this interpretation, Israel could emerge as an important technological and financial center, especially if global companies begin to concentrate operations in strategically considered regions. Israel already has a highly developed technology sector, and it also possesses one of the most efficient intelligence agencies in the world. This combination of technology, intelligence, and diplomatic influence could transform the country into a central node of global networks, especially in areas such as cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and defense. Some analysts believe this could further strengthen its international position. Another dimension of this hypothesis involves global trade. If certain trade routes are disrupted by wars or sanctions, new centers of negotiation may emerge. Countries that produce natural resources would need to find new trade partners, and new intermediaries could arise in this process. In extreme scenarios, even international currencies could change. Historically, major monetary transformations have occurred after wars or deep crises. Some analysts raise the possibility of new financial systems emerging, especially if digital currencies and alternative financial systems gain strength. But none of these transformations occur in isolation. Economic, political, and technological changes tend to reinforce one another. When combined, they can profoundly alter the structure of the international system. Within some more speculative interpretations, this period of chaos could prepare the ground for a new type of global order. An order based on digital surveillance, integrated financial systems, and highly concentrated technological centers. In this view, conflicts and crises would function as catalysts for transformation. But there is also another dimension to this debate, a spiritual and symbolic dimension. Some groups interpret current geopolitical events in light of ancient religious prophecies that speak of final conflicts, global leaders, and deep spiritual transformations. Among these interpretations, the idea of the emergence of a central figure of power frequently appears, a figure that would arise amid global chaos. Some religious traditions associate this figure with the concept of the Antichrist, a leadership that would consolidate political and spiritual power before major apocalyptic events. Within this narrative, global conflicts and technological transformations would be only stages of a much larger process. A process that would culminate in final confrontations described in ancient texts. Among them frequently appears the so-called War of Gog and Magog, a symbolic confrontation that would represent the climax of a historical era. Naturally, these interpretations belong to the field of theology and eschatology. They are not part of academic or scientific consensus, but they continue to exert strong cultural and religious influence in various parts of the world. What makes this scenario particularly interesting is the overlap of different narratives: political narratives, economic narratives, technological narratives, and spiritual narratives, all trying to explain the same global transformations. Perhaps the most important question is not which of these interpretations is correct, but rather how different societies interpret the same events, because the way we understand the world often influences the decisions we make, and those decisions end up shaping history itself. If some of these hypotheses are correct, the next 2 decades could profoundly redefine the structure of global power. But it is also possible that the future will follow a completely different path. History always surprises those who believe they have discovered its final script. For now, all we can do is observe the signs, analyze patterns, and try to understand how the invisible forces of politics, technology, and culture are reshaping the world. Because the 21st century is only just beginning. Throughout history, moments of great transformation have always been difficult to interpret while they were happening. Only years later do the patterns become clear. However, when observers attempt to analyze the present, they inevitably resort to hypotheses. Some of these hypotheses seem plausible, others seem exaggerated, but all arise from the same human attempt to understand the direction of events. The interpretation presented so far proposes a very specific scenario. A scenario in which international conflicts, social crises, and technological advances are part of a larger process. A process that would be reorganizing the global system of power. But this interpretation raises an important question. What if this reading is partially wrong? History shows that grand theories about the future often fail. Experts have predicted inevitable collapses that never happened. Others believe certain powers would dominate the world forever. And yet, new forces have always emerged. The 20th century, for example, was marked by dramatic predictions. Empires considered invincible disappeared, ideologies that seemed permanent collapsed, and new powers emerged unexpectedly. Therefore, any analysis of the future must maintain a certain degree of humility, even when patterns seem convincing, even when events appear to confirm certain hypotheses. The real world rarely follows exactly the path we imagine. Even so, some trends can be observed with relative clarity. The first is the increasing competition among major powers. The United States, China, Russia, and other nations compete for economic, technological, and military influence. This competition will profoundly shape the 21st century. The second trend involves technology. Never in human history have so many technological capabilities emerged at the same time. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, digital surveillance systems, cyber weapons. Each of these technologies has the potential to transform entire societies. And when powerful technologies appear in an unstable geopolitical environment, the risks increase, because these tools can be used both for development and for control, for freedom or for surveillance, for cooperation or for conflict. A third trend involves profound social changes. Societies around the world face similar challenges: political polarization, crises of institutional trust, persistent economic inequalities, and a growing sense of uncertainty about the future. These social pressures can generate unpredictable political movements. Throughout history, periods of instability have often produced unexpected leaders. Some of them promoted positive reforms. Others led their societies down dangerous paths. It is at this point that religious and cultural narratives re-enter the debate. Many spiritual traditions speak of periods of great turbulence before profound transformations. For some religious currents, the current world seems to reflect these moments described in ancient prophetic texts. But even these religious interpretations have multiple readings. Some believe they describe literal events. Others understand these passages as metaphors for spiritual and moral changes in humanity. Both views have coexisted for centuries. Regardless of the interpretation adopted, one thing seems clear. We are living in a moment of transition. The international order built after World War II is being questioned. New centers of power are emerging. New technologies are redefining human possibilities. In this context, the future remains open. A more cooperative global system may emerge, or a prolonged period of intense rivalries may arise. We may see technological advances that expand human freedom, or we may witness unprecedented systems of social control. What will happen in the coming decades will depend on countless decisions. Decisions made by governments, by companies, by communities, and also by ordinary individuals. History is not only the result of major global strategies, it is also shaped by everyday human choices, by values, by beliefs, by visions of the future. Perhaps the real question is not whether there is a grand plan behind events. Perhaps the most important question is another. What kind of world are we building through our own actions? Because regardless of theories about the future, one thing remains true. The 21st century is still being written, and the final outcome of this story has not yet been decided. Perhaps, when historians of the future look back at this era, they will see it as a moment of great risk, but also a moment of great possibility. A moment when humanity had to decide which path to follow, between conflict and cooperation, between control and freedom, between fear and awareness. The answer to these choices is still open, and perhaps that is exactly what makes this moment in history so decisive. When broad theories about the future begin to circulate, a natural reaction emerges: skepticism. And this skepticism is healthy. Throughout history, many grand interpretations have tried to explain the destiny of the world. Some of these interpretations captured real trends. Others turned out to be merely reflections of the anxieties of their own time. Therefore, any analysis must be examined carefully. Even so, certain questions keep returning. Why do so many conflicts seem to arise simultaneously in different regions? Why do strategic rivalries intensify across multiple continents at the same time? And why are new technologies of social control expanding rapidly? Some analysts argue that these phenomena may be connected by deep structural changes. Changes in the global balance of power, changes in economic systems, changes in how societies are organized. These transformations often occur in historical cycles. Over the past 500 years, different powers have dominated the international stage. First, the European empires, then the great industrial powers. Later, the international order, led by the United States after World War II. But no system of power remains static forever. When a global order begins to weaken, new forces inevitably emerge, and the transition period between two orders is usually turbulent. Wars, economic crises, rapid technological changes, all these factors tend to appear simultaneously. Some scholars call these periods systemic transitions, moments when the world needs to reorganize its power structures, and these transitions rarely occur without conflict. If this interpretation is correct, what we are witnessing today may be the beginning of one of these major transitions, a change that may last decades, perhaps even half a century. During this process, different models of global organization may compete with each other. Models based on liberal democracy, models based on centralized states, models based on technology and digital control, each trying to offer an answer to the challenges of the modern world. At the same time, emerging technologies may accelerate this transformation. Artificial intelligence, automation, Global digital networks. These tools are profoundly altering the economy and politics. Some of them promise extraordinary gains in productivity. Others raise concerns about privacy and freedom, and many of them are still only at the beginning of their development. In more pessimistic scenarios, these technologies could facilitate highly sophisticated systems of social control. In more optimistic scenarios, they could expand access to knowledge and improve global quality of life. The final outcome will depend on how these technologies are used, and on which values guide their development. Meanwhile, religious narratives continue to offer their own interpretations of events. For some groups, current global tensions reflect prophetic signs described in ancient texts. These interpretations appear across various spiritual traditions: Christian, Islamic, each offering a different reading of the future. In many of these narratives, periods of great instability precede profound spiritual changes. Some speak of charismatic global leaders. Others speak of major confrontations between opposing forces. And some describe the emergence of a new era after a period of crisis. Regardless of the interpretation adopted, these narratives reveal something important. Humanity has always tried to understand the future through stories. Stories that help give meaning to the chaos of history. But perhaps the most important lesson is another. The future rarely follows exactly the scripts we imagine. It tends to be more complex, more surprising, and often more ambiguous than our theories can predict. Therefore, when observing the transformations of the 21st century, perhaps the best posture is investigation. Observe patterns, question narratives, analyze evidence, and remain open to multiple interpretations. Because the world continues to change, and each generation needs to reinterpret its own time. If we are truly entering a new phase of global history, the signs will become increasingly clearer. Conflicts, innovations, cultural changes, all these elements will help reveal the direction humanity is taking. Until then, perhaps the most important thing is to maintain two rare qualities: curiosity and discernment, because understanding the world requires both. The history of the 21st century is still being written, and the coming decades may reveal transformations that today we are only beginning to imagine. The search to understand the past has always been part of the human journey. We explore ruins, decipher ancient inscriptions, and investigate forgotten accounts. Each discovery expands our understanding of the civilizations that came before us. But it also reveals new questions, questions that continue to drive our curiosity. Because history is not just a record of the past, it is a continuous path of discovery. Because some secrets of history are still waiting to be revealed.